Welcome back. Disqualified. Former President Donald Trump was just declared ineligible to be on Colorado's ballot for president next year following a Colorado Supreme Court ruling which ruled him ineligible on the grounds of the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause. This part of the Constitution says that anyone who partakes in insurrection against the United States is ineligible to serve in federal office, and that Trump's involvement in the January 6th riot qualified as insurrection. The move sent shockwaves throughout the political sphere due to the unexpected and surprising nature of the ruling. We'll take a look at reaction from candidates on both sides. We'll talk about how this might affect the dynamics for the 2024 race, whether or not this goes to the Supreme Court, and how this affects Trump's political future. We'll be taking a look at those stories and more today, Friday, December 22nd, 2023. From Ishaan Media, this is the Ishaan S Show, a podcast about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics, with me, your host, Ishaan. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. 318 days until the next general election, 24 days until the Iowa Caucuses, and 74 days until the March 5th Colorado primary. Usually I don't mention Colorado because 90% of the time it's not quite the relevant state for us to really be talking about when it comes to presidential elections. But thanks to a lot of interesting stuff that happened this week, it has catapulted itself into the political sphere. So, friends, what we got, Supreme Court of Colorado ruling, that basically ruled that former President Donald Trump is ineligible to be on their ballot. People don't quite understand the magnitude of this. They first off, they don't understand what being disqualified from a ballot means. So let's first understand what that means. That means that Trump can't be on the ballot. So when you go to vote, his name cannot show up on that ballot to vote, which is pretty monumental because it's the first time in American history that a former president, but also a presidential candidate has been barred from appearing on a ballot. Now, the court's reasoning for this is actually pretty interesting. So the court ruled that Trump's involvement in the January 6th riot disqualified him on the grounds that the January 6th riots were an insurrection. They ruled that it was the case. And civics lesson for my friends, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, a lot of people know it because of civics classes that they take, that the 14th Amendment provides, equal protection to every American, regardless of race, gender, background, what have you. Every American is protected equally under the law, and the 14th Amendment is used a lot by the Supreme Court when it's incorporated in defense of laws that might violate the rights of others. That's what we know the 14th Amendment for a lot. What we don't know the 14th Amendment for is actually, interestingly enough, its third section, its insurrection clause. This part of the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, says that anyone who partakes in an insurrection against the United States or had taken part in an insurrection, gone against the oath of office they took when they were serving in office, is ineligible to serve in federal office again. It's an archaic rule for some. It came out about after the Civil War, when the Republicans in office then really did not want Confederates being elected back to Congress and, back to the presidency potentially. So they passed this amendment which barred anyone who partook in an insurrection, i.e. the Civil War, being on the Confederate side, from ever serving in office again. And that mechanism did pretty much bar a lot of Confederates from making it back into the federal government. And one may argue for a good cause because they did try to actively dismantle the fabric of the United States, and so they shouldn't have been in the government that governs the country. So that's where this came from. It's been used a few times to bar certain candidates from being on the ballot, but it's so irrelevant that most people didn't even know about it until its most high-profile uh, its most high-profile recipient, which is Donald Trump. A lot of moves were being made to essentially stop the former president from being on ballots across the country after the January 6th riot. A lot of people were rocked, scared, and shook by it, and especially by the president's involvement, because it's undeniable that Trump was involved in some ways in that riot. He spoke at the Ellipse. You cannot deny that he spoke at the Ellipse. A crowd of people that he spoke to then went to the Capitol and wreaked havoc. And we're approaching the 3rd anniversary of it. And it's annoying to some like me who have to keep defending the fact that it was in fact a riot. It was horrific and it was disappointing. There are people that defend what happened on January 6th. As for who was involved, who incited it, that might be a little iffy in terms of how we look at it. But undeniably, Trump was involved in some respects in that riot. Whether or not you call it an insurrection is your decision. I would just digress when I say that people question the involvement of Trump. He was there. He was the head and face of this event, and it resulted in a riot. Anyway, the court ruled that basically Trump's involvement in this, insurrection, if you call it that, disqualifies him from taking part in the election. And this was shocking because no one saw this result really coming. Not in the sense that no one saw the decision, just people didn't expect the court to actually be ruling on something like this when they did. It came out of nowhere. You look at your phone and you see this ruling from the Supreme Court and it says, "Oh, Donald Trump not allowed to be on the Colorado ballot." And you go, "What? Really? No way." And it's not a foreign concept. There have been people, including many Republicans for that matter. In fact, they were saying, I don't know if it's true or not. I heard that the case that was initially brought that made it all the way to the Colorado Supreme Court did come from some Republicans that were affected by Trump and didn't want him on the ballot. So it came from them. A lot of Republicans, but surely enough, a lot of Democrats had been pushing for ways to get Trump off the ballot because according to them, it's an insurrection, January 6th, and Trump has no place to be on a ballot. So they pushed their way through, got to the Supreme Court, and they made the ruling. Now Donald Trump is, for the time being, not allowed to be on Colorado's ballot for president. At least in their primary, not in the general election. He can still be on the general election ballot, but you have to actually, get the signatures and whatnot and all the qualifications to actually appear on that first. His name has been struck from the ballot in Colorado for the primary election. So that means that right now there are Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and whoever else qualified to be there. And it's shocking because for the longest time, we only heard some chitter chatter about it. I remember in the first debate, Asa Hutchinson, the irrelevant one from that analysis, if you recall, probably won't because, again, he's irrelevant. But when he was on the debate stage, he actually did say that there is this provision in the 14th Amendment that basically disbars Trump. He was the only person to actually talk about that. And so far, in my view of mainstream political coverage, Asa Hutchinson, interestingly enough, is the only person that ever talked about this stuff. I found that quite interesting. But it wasn't a mainstream thing in the sense that people didn't know that this was something that people could do. They didn't know that that some court could strike you off like that. It's an odd concept. So in retaliation, Trump beat Trump. He released a statement, or rather sent out a truth social, denouncing the court's ruling. He said that it's an activist court, saying that the people are not being represented, and a spokesperson of his went further and said that Joe Biden has been failing as a president, and now they know that Trump has in fact been coming out as a stronger opponent to Trump, so now to Biden, so now their goal, they're saying, is to get him off the ballot so that he doesn't have to compete against him. That was Trump. He was pretty quick in his reaction. And there was a rally that he had right after the ruling, and he didn't speak about it for a while until we got some more comments. Nikki Haley said that a court should not be deciding what Trump's fate is, as did Chris Christie, as did Ron DeSantis. So I want to play all the Republican candidates' response. So let's hear that.
I do not believe Donald Trump should be prevented from being president of the United States by any court.
Make no mistake, I want to win this election, but I want to do it through the front door by convincing the voters of this country that I'm best positioned to lead our movement to the next level, not by having the competition eliminated from a ballot.
We don't need to have judges making these decisions. We need voters to make these decisions. So I want to see this in the hands of the voters.
I think the precedent that a court could just take somebody off the ballot without even any type of criminal conviction or anything like that, I think that is not the way the law is intended to be enforced.
So for the most part, it was a pretty united front backing Trump, and really with all of Trump's legal struggles for the past year or so, the candidates have been left, right, and center backing him consistently, so no one has been really criticizing him in that respect. But I wonder, I honestly wonder what this does to his polling numbers, because so far in the past few weeks, Donald Trump has actually been beating Joe Biden in the polls a lot. Like, it's Trump, Biden's having a really tough time in the polls. He is disapproved. Right now, he's the most disapproved president in modern history at this point in their term. You'd have to go all the way back to Harry Truman to find a president this disapproved, which is crazy. And Joe Biden has also been struggling in the polls against Donald Trump. Donald Trump is being revered. At one point, when people used to say when Trump was president that Joe Biden is more mentally fit, that Joe Biden's more equipped to handle the economy, Joe Biden's more equipped to handle immigration, blah, 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 all of that has been turned around. Now Trump is seen as the more competent candidate when it comes to mental fitness, when it comes to the border, when it comes to the economy. And I wonder how a court ruling like this could be twisted in favor of Joe Biden, of Donald Trump. It's interesting to watch because Donald Trump has very eloquently, I guess, turned this ruling into something of the liberal left trying to strike him off. It may not be true. I don't think it's that true. I don't think there's this whole conspiracy to just remove him. It's the justice system working. But to his supporters, which he's very good at communicating with, he's telling them that the Democrats don't want him on the ballot. They're doing everything they can, using every mechanism in the books to make sure that he doesn't get on the ballot, that he doesn't win their votes, that he doesn't become president, because in his view, Joe Biden's a failing president that's desperate. It's funny hearing that from him because, again, the topic we're talking about is January 6th, but I digress. This ruling is widely expected to be appealed like crazy and make it to the Supreme Court. That is expected. In Colorado, it's a Democrat majority. For the past 16 years or whatever, we've had Democrat governors in Colorado, and I believe 5 of the 8 or 7 justices on their court are appointed by Democrats. Their chief justice is still a Republican. So, and not all of them are Democrats. Actually, some of them are independent and unregistered. So in the court's ruling, 2 of the people that supported it was a 4-3 ruling. 2 of them were Democrats and 2 of them were unaffiliated independents. And people question it. People think that it's a partisan court. Really, it's not. People don't do their research. I was watching this guy on Fox News go on and on and on about how they're all partisan, blah, blah, blah. The guy didn't do his research. Really, the Colorado Supreme Court selection process is way better than maybe our own Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court selection process. It's a bipartisan commission of people that nominate candidates, and it's a pool of these candidates that the governor then picks from. So all of these candidates, all of these justices were from a bipartisan pool of candidates that the governors just happened to pick. So it's not like they all come in with this inherently partisan agenda. A bipartisan commission is going to select bipartisan candidates. It's going to try to select as nonpartisan candidates as possible. But undeniably, of course, if 100% of the affiliated people in this ruling happen to be Democrats, then yeah, it's not a good look for the court. But that brings us to the Supreme Court. When it goes up to the Supreme Court, we have a 6-3 conservative to liberal majority. A lot of Democrats are nervous because this court is pretty activist. I don't deny it. It's an activist court when it comes to affirmative action, when it comes to the LGBTQ rights, and obviously, most notably, when it comes to abortion rights. They overturned Roe v. Wade. So it's going to be not so surprising when the court backs Trump. But sometimes these justices actually do shock us. They do throw a couple of bouncers here and there. Brett Kavanaugh backing the effort to redraw Alabama's districts. Interestingly remarkable, because you wouldn't think a partisan guy would be backing the Democrats when they want to redraw districts because minorities aren't being represented. Amy Coney Barrett has been very flippy-floppy on some key issues. I still expect the court to back Trump, but there are some people saying that it's going to be a 9-0 backing Trump. I wonder what that would look like, because the Supreme Court, they have a pretty rocky relationship when it comes to entering into politics and elections, because everyone can go back to Bush v. Gore. I mean, I wasn't alive then, but my dad was, and your parents were too, for all my young listeners, and some of my listeners, in fact, you guys were there too. You remember that it was pretty annoyingly outrageous for so many people across the country when the conservative court backed the conservative candidate. In the end, it didn't change anything. I mean, George Bush became president and no one questioned the authority. It just went through. People just accepted it and George Bush became president. With this, it's going to be cool to watch because this is a far more unpredictable court. The other court was pretty predictable back then. This court is way more unpredictable in the sense that they all said that they are strict constitutionalists. We listen to whatever's written in there. It's pretty clear what's written in the Constitution. It says if you partake in an insurrection against the United States, you are not eligible to be a federal office holder. So the court's ruling really goes and hinges on two key questions. One, what does it mean to be eligible to be on a ballot? I know it sounds super philosophical, but that is exactly the type of questions that these, Supreme Court cases ask. And the other question is whether or not January 6th was an insurrection. The court will decide that. Because, mind you, that it's not questioning whether or not Trump was involved. It was questioning whether or not this is an insurrection. And that's also what Donald Trump was saying. So this is going to be remarkable in the sense that we are going to put to bed one of the most rocky incidents of American history. I say that, I'm bold in saying it, but I know that January 6th is a really big moment in our nation's history. And the court's ruling on this is going to give us a definitive, clear... Actually, I take that back. It's not going to be definitive. It's not going to be clear, but they're going to give us a set, bare result. And it's up to you whether you want to accept it or not. It's going to be up to you whether or not you are happy with it or sad. But ultimately, Donald Trump's candidacy is in question here. Donald Trump's ability to, run in political office is in question here. And there are 72 million Americans that are very upset by this ruling. So what the court decides to do is going to have a huge, huge, huge weight on the future of politics in this country, especially with Trump at the helm of it, and especially as we enter an election year. There were so many things that I wanted to talk about for today's episode, including how Nikki Haley is like within 4 points of Donald Trump in New Hampshire, or how the RNC is hemorrhaging their money right now. But this happens on Wednesday, and it changes everything. And it just goes to show the grasp that Donald Trump has. Nikki Haley's right about one thing. Chaos follows him wherever he goes. Whether that's good or whether that's bad depends on whether or not you support him. But the fact of the matter is, chaos follows him. And this is what his supporters mean by whenever they say that there is a conspiracy to remove Donald Trump. They actually think this. And Donald Trump effectively markets all of these incidents like that. So when the Supreme Court rules on this, they're going to put their foot down, and that's just what we go with. It's definitely, I feel like, going to be in the Supreme Court's hands. They obviously reserve the right not to hear this case. If they don't hear this case, if they say, no, we're not interested in this, then Trump will not be on the ballot for Colorado's primary. And it doesn't really matter if he's on Colorado's ballot as much as it matters across the country. There could be states everywhere that try to remove Trump from the ballot. States everywhere. There are efforts all right now to try to stop him. And there have been previous cases that have been struck in some states that say you can't bar the president from being on the ballot. Notable stuff. What a time to be alive right now. It's crazy. It's unpredictable. It's unnerving. And how does this shift the dynamics for the 2024 race? I think Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are in a hotel room somewhere, wherever they're campaigning, saying, well, shoot, there goes another shot at becoming president, because they just keep receiving blow after blow. It's not working for them, and it's not their fault. It's just that Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and he keeps taking votes from them. We're going to keep our eye on this case. I think they were saying that January is probably when this case is going to make it up to the court, the Supreme Court. We will be watching very, very closely at what the court decides to do, because ultimately the 2024 election no longer hangs in Jack Smith's cases, does not hang in Fani Willis's cases. It doesn't rest in any other case but now this issue, because this is now the pivotal issue of this race, and we're going to keep a close eye on it. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Keep an eye out, because we are very close to the 2023 political year in review. So keep your eyes out for that. We'll see you next week here on the Ishaan S Show. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. And so that does it for us here today at the Ishaan S Show. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and follow the Ishaan S Show on Twitter and Instagram for breaking news posts and updates about the show. And if you want to learn more about political stories, then check out my political news blog on the IshaanSshow.com and go ahead and subscribe to it. Do us a favor and share this episode and all your other favorite episodes with your friends and family. It's the best way for this show to grow and get more people listening to it. Thanks again for all your support, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.